God, these good actors, they just make it easier for us, right? I get too impatient. I just want to put that fart sound effect in because it's going to be great.
Well, next sound you hear will be me expressing confidence.
Impressive.
Our guest today is a member of the British Film Editors and was nominated in 2022 for the Breakthrough Editor category at the BFE Awards. Based in London, he's assisted on several projects including Landscapers and Criminal UK, was an assembly editor on Season 3 of Sex Education, an editor on ITV drama Litvinenko, Apple TV's thriller Hijack starring Idris Elba, and most recently, Season 4 of Apple TV's spy thriller Slow Horses starring Gary Oldman. Robert Frost, welcome to Cut to Reveal.
Thanks so much. It's great to speak with you all today.
Yeah, we're excited to have you.
Yeah, and we have to start with like how you got on board of Slow Horses, because we're all jealous, right? Like we're all jealous.
Because you're so young and we're so old.
Yeah,
I am also jealous. Like I was a fan, just like all of you, I guess. If that's what you're saying, I'd seen the first 2 seasons. And Slow Horses does this great thing where at the end of a season, there's a trailer for the next season because they shoot them back to back. So I was like, oh my God, they've filmed so much of it. How can I possibly get onto this? But to be honest, it was just one of those things that was good luck. And, it's that horrible cliche of knowing the right people. I was working on Hijack, and it's 2 of the exec producers on that show also did Slow Horses. So it was a sort of very non-calculated thing of me of realizing, oh, these people work on it. So I I tried to time it correctly. We had a really good viewing on an episode of Hijack, and I was like, oh, so what's happening with Slow Horses? And they're like, oh yeah, there might be an opportunity to interview for it. Here's the right person to email. Maybe that's underselling it a little bit. It wasn't quite so easy. I had to go away and I sort of did my homework. I read the books. I read the first 4 books. I caught up and knew the story and could talk properly about, the characters and the scripts and stuff in the interview with Adam, the director, and Jane, who's the producer. And yeah, that's how it came about. So a kind of combination of being in the right place at the right time and hopefully doing a good enough job that they wanted to hire me.
Yeah, clearly. Because I had read in an article, that IBC article, about how you were basically kind of invited to pitch for the season. And now, coming from kind of like a commercial background where like pitches are like, here's my PowerPoint presentation and this is what I can do for you. It was very interesting in my perspective of it, and then how you ended up kind of selling yourself to become the editor. I mean, obviously you won it, but I'm just curious how that even worked out.
Yeah, pitch is an interesting word. I guess you are, in any interview, you're trying to sell yourself for the role. And I think what's interesting sometimes being on the other side when you're looking for assistant editors is you're kind of just looking for someone that is enthusiastic and sort of gives off an air of, I can do this and we're going to work together and it's going to be great. So I guess in interviews and in the Slow Horses interview, that's what I tried to give across. It's, and I don't know how other people behave in interviews, but for me, it was talking about the story, getting excited about the scripts, asking the director, Adam, about what scenes he was most interested in and what his take was on things. And I think it's just, hopefully it's that enthusiasm and, speaking a bit about previous projects. I've done action, I've done a bit of comedy. Like this show seems like it's a blend of the both of those. And yeah, I guess just sort of selling yourself a little bit.
Are you able to talk about the schedule as an editor on a show like that, on a show like Slow Horses? Because when you start working on an episode, you have at some point to deliver your cut, then you're working with the director, then there's the showrunner, then there's the channel or the streamer that gives feedback. So how does that all work for you as an editor?
Yeah, interesting. I think Slow Horses in particular was quite a long project. So I started on it in March of 2023, and it was like a 110 days shoot. So obviously during that process, it's myself and Harrison Wall, who was the other editor on season 4. We each had 3 episodes, and you're just assembling, you're just getting through the material. Every few weeks, at the end of the week, we would send assemblies that we were happy with to Adam, the director. And then every month or so, they would collate the stuff that they were most excited about, and Apple would see that. I was more used to in previous jobs, you'd send out assemblies weekly. But I think the sense was that, Slow Horses, we sort of know what it is. It's the 4th season now. Like, no one's too nervous about seeing that, Gary Oldman can act or whatever. We sort of know what it is. And then basically, at the end of the shoot, Adam comes in, he works with us. We had at least 2 or 3, if not more, weeks to work on those first 2 episodes. I guess that's the sort of director's cut, as it were, working through scene by scene. And, Harrison was amazing. We were very collaborative. We would watch each other's assemblies. We would watch each other's cuts. We would each be in the viewings with Adam, no matter what episode it was, so that we were all sort of making this 6-episode story together. And then, producers watch it. Sometimes they came in. Sometimes it was, you send them a link and try not to worry about it over the weekend. And then they give notes. About a week after that, it goes to Apple. They usually try to only watch it a couple of times. Apple are, the execs there, they've got a lot of shows. So you have to sort of book in the time with them quite early. It's like, Apple are watching it here, and if they don't get the link then you've missed your chance. So hopefully that answers your question with a rough timeline. But I mean, I was on it right the way through until the end of 2023, and then they did a few sort of pickups earlier this year. And then,
All right. And I wanted to know, did you, on this show or earlier in another show, did you ever find yourself in a situation where you had to kind of recut a scene to make it say something different that was on the written page? Because it's so it's heavily written. It's based on books. And also you can't change too much the lines, because it can one line can have meaning for next episode, or something that happens can have meaning for a future episode. So did you ever find yourself struggling to make a scene work, and then having the leeway to be able to recut it with the director or maybe with the showrunner to make it go a nicer way than it does?
Yeah, interesting. I'll have to think now.
Maybe you don't. Maybe you don't find yourself in situations like that.
I mean, you said it is a very well-written show, and I think that is sort of the secret sauce, is that Will Smith, who's the sort of lead writer, showrunner, I guess, the writing is very good. And as an editor, when you're reading the script, and the end of one scene works perfectly with the start of the next, it's amazing, because you're like, great, this is going to make me look so good, because it just feels like it flows from one to the next. But there was a lot of back and forth in the first 2 episodes, because the start of season 4, we're trying to sell this idea that the main character, River, has been shot and is dead. And what ended up happening is Harrison and I swapped a lot of scenes from episode 1 and episode 2. Originally in episode 1, you actually saw River, the actor, Jack Loudon, arriving at his grandpa's house. You saw him enter, and then we did the classic thing of he goes into the bathroom, and then we cut to a wide of the house, gunshot, and you were like, okay, now we're into the story. And it always felt a little bit of a cheat. Like, anyone who's remotely, film literate is going to say, well, there's no way that he was actually killed. In episode 2, you then had the more subjective point of view from the grandpa, who saw someone who looked like River come in and go up, and they had this great shot of this double being shot, and you actually saw it, and you saw the blood in the bath. So we did a lot of work with that, of switching around shots that were for completely different episodes to try and sell that cheat. I guess that's a good example of sort of changing what was written so that it landed better on the page, because that's something that works really well in the book. You can sort of say that River's dead, and you totally buy it, but it's a lot harder to sell it in the opening 10 minutes of an episode.
Yeah, it was very well in the episode, because you really get into a subjective point of view of the grandfather who's losing his mind. So you don't you're really in his state I kind of like in the movie The Father with Anthony Hopkins. Like you really with him, and so you really like at some point. I knew that he probably wasn't dead, but I wasn't 100% sure.
And that's enough, I think. That's really good, and that was the secret sauce. is Jonathan Pryce and his performance, and the way that he sells that. Is it just that he's confused, or is something else going on here? Yeah, great. I'm glad it sort of worked.
That being said, how long before you guys were like, okay, this is kind of working, but not really. This could be stronger. Before you decided to like kind of change it, be like, okay, well, let's combine that stuff. Like, did you already do like a couple iterations and producers and whatever we're looking at it, or was it like right off the bat?
And was it a conversation with the director and the showrunner to, look, it doesn't work? Who realized that first?
I definitely got to credit Harrison, because from the moment we got those rushes, he had the sort of harder job, because his episode 2 starts to explain what's happened, and as originally written, it was the double coming to the house, and he from the beginning was questioning whether or not we were going to be able to sell it. So, our first cuts that we presented to Adam were as scripted. And then really from day one, it was a conversation of like, what's the best way to do this? And we were fortunate that the rest of those episodes were in good enough shape that we could spend quite a lot of time playing around with that, because it is the fun stuff. And, especially with it being the opening of Ep 1, it's got to make you lean forward. Otherwise it's, you don't want people turning off or not buying the whole premise. So, but there was definitely a conversation with the producers, and Will, the writer, acknowledged that there was a million ways to do it. And of course, because Adam, the director, has done all 6 episodes, he's not precious about what goes where. He's shot it all, and he's happy to do it whatever way works.
Because of like you're seeing in previous episodes, like people dying, that when that happened, I was like, he can't be dead, but maybe he can be dead. I don't know. He's kind of lose different characters that you didn't forget.
But when watching the episode, I was thinking of the 24 TV series when I was younger, and anybody could die at any moment, and that's kind of something that happened in Spy series. And so I was thinking like maybe he got a job on a movie and couldn't be there for season 4.
I love 24 as well. That's always one of my references as well. I think that's great. And I think the great thing about it was that it was written that, you get the reveal at the end of episode 1 that he's not dead. Because I think to ask people to sort of wait a week would be just frustrating.
I was watching it with my wife, and I was like, they can't just get rid of a character and not even show their face on the screen. Like, this isn't True Blood, or whatever. It was so funny. But,
it's not a proper goodbye.
That's great. Yeah, exactly.
I wanted to ask about dialogue editing, because like this show, like, and by the way, you're joining like, kind of like after 3 seasons were already made, right? So I guess you had to follow what kind of was already established when it comes to pacing and the rhythm of editing and so on, right? So you probably made some homework there as well, right? But I'm curious about like how you approach dialogue editing, because this show has very distinct style, I think, of dialogue editing. A lot of overlapping dialogue, but also very smart dialogues, very like, things that you have to. They have to be spoken well so that the audience can like, follow up and add 2 + 2 and so on, right? So how was it? Like, what was your experience with that? And like, was the shooting style like very like good for us as editors? Also like coverage like for each person without overlapping dialogue, or like was it more like, go, and if there is overlapping dialogue in the scene, then we just go with it?
Yeah, I think in terms of like understanding the grammar of the show, I think, to be honest, that homework was just naturally by the fact that I had watched and enjoyed the show. With the standard Slow Horses scene, which is 4 or 5 people in a room, lambs sort of insulting each of them one by one. It's written. It's obviously the writing is incredible, but I've got to say, like, because the acting is so good that it can, I found it more challenging working on, independent projects and stuff, because you are cutting around performances that maybe aren't as strong, or they did run out of time and couldn't get all the coverage. So in terms of the pacing of the scene, they're very good at sort of getting that right. in the wide coverage. The way that I would usually approach assembling a scene like that is I'll watch everything, and then I place the wide on the timeline, and that sort of gives you the length of the scene. It gives you the timing of the jokes, because they're doing it and they're all bouncing off each other. And then I sort of just pop in to whoever's speaking and build a very quick assembly that way. And then because sometimes you can spoil a joke by thinking, oh, I should, add a few frames here at the end, or do this. And actually, the way that I watch dailies is I'll have it in the list view in Avid, and I make notes as I go, and I note on things, that made me laugh. That was a good performance of that line. And it's just about preserving those moments and yeah, just using the actor's pacing, I guess, to get it right.
Mm-hmm. Do you know if they rehearsed a lot?
No more than a usual show would. I've been on set, and they come in, they've got it down, they'll rehearse it, and then they'll go for it. And it develops. Sometimes it does develop over the course of the scene, and you can see, oh, they've sort of shifted it a little bit this way, and now this person's standing up when they say that line, and you just sort of the dailies sort of tell you which way they were leaning towards.
Do you still watch all of the takes before you even start assembling the scene, or do you go with circled take first and then you potentially go back if needed?
I'm one of those people that has to watch everything. I feel like I'm going to have to watch it at some point, and I'd rather get it out of the way.
Yeah, right away. Mm-hmm.
So I will watch I'll watch from slate one, take one through everything. And usually, it's quite helpful, because then you learn the scene. You kind of can do the dialogue yourself then, and it makes it a bit easier. So I do watch everything. And some of the performances are so good that you do get slight variation. So even if the circle take, was the last take, and, that's great, there's always something else in the other takes. I feel like I don't want to sort of miss it.
Yeah.
So if I had told you 15 years ago that you would be cutting Idris Elba, Gary Oldman, Kristen Scott Thomas, and Jonathan Pryce, would you have believed me?
I don't think so. No. It's kind of ridiculous. God, these good actors, they just make it easier for us, right? I didn't, and I think I am one of those people, probably like the three of you, that's just obsessed with film and TV, and I watch a lot of stuff. I'm making films with my friends when I was a teenager, always wanting to do this. So I do feel very lucky that I am able to do it as a job. It's super fun.
And about Gary Oldman, because I know another editor worked on him on a movie, and she was saying, it's Danny Cooper, she was saying that he couldn't do a bad take. He was great all the time. And I don't know if you have the same experience.
He just is the character, and he's so, he's just a professional. He's got it down. You watch the dailies and you just feel like you're watching the show. And that's sometimes the challenge with watching the dailies, is I get too impatient. I just want to cut from that to that, and I just want to, it's going to be so funny. Or, I just want to put that fart sound effect in because it's going to be great. But I just, but they're all really good. Jack Loudon doesn't, he has to play the straight man sometimes, and he has to but he's so good at doing just little expressions and things that, again, they make it easy, because you're like, well, that's brilliant. That's definitely going in the scene. Yeah. You just got to follow the performances, really.
And about career and getting where you are right now, when did you feel like you arrived in a way as an editor? You went from shitty projects to better projects, and then to great projects. When did you really feel that things were happening?
There might be a shitty project next. We don't know what's going to happen.
It's true.
Who knows?
Uncertainty of the life of the filmmaker. Yeah.
Exactly. The first sort of credit that I had, sort of broadcast credit as an editor, was the show Litvinenko, which is for ITV, and that was it was a gradual process of editing on that. So it was sort of a smoother transition. It wasn't like, oh my God, I've booked this editing job and everything's going to be great from now on. Because the other editor on Litvinenko, David Webb, is an editor that I've assisted a lot. I assisted him on Sex Education and Criminal. And on Litvinenko, I was assisting him and assembling my episode, which then turned into 2 episodes. So I wasn't actually an editor until the shoot finished and we realized, okay, Rob, isn't bad at editing. He can probably do the rest of the episode and it'll be fine. So it was a sort of a gradual thing. And again, it's that two sides of it really, which I guess you could say is luck, like being in the right place at the right time, but also putting in the hours with Dave and showing that, I was learning from him and could cut a scene and that it was going to be fine. Were those two things that came together for Litvinenko. And then Jim, who directed that, did Hijack. So it was a sort of, oh, okay, you're going from this ITV show to this giant Apple show. And I genuinely never did not expect to do it. I knew that Dave was doing it, but I just thought, well, I've done this one show, and it was literally a one-line email from the producer, like, Jim wants you for Hijack. Are you available? And I was like, I just need to walk around a little bit. I can't reply within the same 30 seconds of this email.
Play cool. I gotta be cool. I gotta be cool.
Yeah, exactly. It's all those hours in the assistant editing role that hopefully led towards that, I hope.
All right, great.
I listened to interview with you and David, and
cool.
talking about how when you guys were working on a Hijacked, and the thing that really excited me about it was kind of something that we talk about a lot on this podcast and within our own careers is kind of like you said, like kind of right place, right time, and kind of creating these good relationships with people. And then that's how it goes. Like, we're kind of just like, well, obviously we want to work on these great projects, but it's also like, for me, I always say this, and I was very, I don't know how to articulate it any better, but I'm always saying, like, I love working. Being an editor is my dream job on anything. So it doesn't matter if it's like a commercial, a music video, film, whatever. But what's important to me is like the people I work with, just because it's like you guys are in the trenches together. So if it's a great project, you're like, we are fucking killing it. And if it's a shitty project, we're like, this fucking sucks. But we're like in it together, and it's just like the collaboration of it. And so it was really interesting. Like, what we say on here is like, it's so simple to like create these relationships. And it's all about, like, this may be an oversimplification of just like being hardworking and just being nice. And like that stuff goes a long way. And then more so than it's almost like we had to remind people about it, where they're like, it can't be that easy. It's just like, listen, it doesn't matter if you're like super tech or really good, if you have a cinematic knowledge of like everything, as long as you're nice and people like working with you and you're a good hang, that's really where it comes into.
It's literally is as simple as that. Like, you've put it way better than I could with my rambling. I think it's just like I watch a lot of film and TV. I devour a lot of podcasts, and every possible YouTube video there is out there about dissecting film and filmmaking. And sometimes you hear interviews with people and you think, well, yeah, it was easy for you because of X, Y, and Z. And I can imagine like a younger me listening to me now thinking, yeah, it's all well and good for you.
That's what we're thinking. That's what we are thinking.
That's what I'm thinking. Genuinely, though, I was interested in filmmaking. I studied it at university, but the university course was great for so many things, but it didn't necessarily lead on to any jobs or connections. That happened when I moved to London. And I did start as a runner, and I was getting tea and coffee for other editors, and you just work your way up that way. And I would hope that route is there for anyone. Hopefully, that's at least the goal. Is that if you genuinely want to be there and enjoy it, and like assisting on sex education was quite a tough gig, but I really liked the show, so I was happy to put in the hours. And not necessarily planning too far ahead, thinking, and that will lead to this, and then I'll be an editor, and then, then I'll be in Hollywood. And
you're just happy to be here.
Yeah, exactly. And, sometimes you work with assistants that don't have that vibe. And it's kind of a shame, because you're like, oh, that editor, they asked you to assemble the scene and you didn't do it. You just went home, and, that was your opportunity right there, and you missed it. So, yeah, you've got to be open to all of that stuff.
Yeah, it's about seizing opportunities and being there, and even like doing the job that they're not asking for, because Like you'll be the one when they're asking for it, you'll be the one who has done it. And you'll be like passionate and you want to talk movies, you want to live and breathe movies in a way. And so that's what you were talking about. And that's why we have this podcast too, is also because we love like thinking, talking to people like you and talking movies and talking storytelling. That's really our passion. And that's why even if you wouldn't make it as great as you're doing right now, it's like it's the universe that we love to talk about and to be in.
Absolutely.
I'm curious how the collaboration with sound department looked like, because I don't have much experience with, like, I only did a few projects where we had, like, you know, a dedicated sound designer or whatever, right? So I'm curious how it works on a show like this. And do you collaborate with like sound department and music people as well? And how far this collaboration goes?
Yeah, I think I know it can vary from project to project, and you know, some of the really big shows or the stuff that's more akin to features, they'll have the post sound team on from super early. With Slow Horses, we temp the whole thing ourselves, and everything that was in the Avid was, our own sourced sound effects. And obviously, music-wise, the helpful thing is by season 4, there was a whole load of the score from the other series. Although we always tried to not use it just as a default, because it's very easy to just like have a bad edit, but just put Slow Horses music on it and be like, yeah, it's Slow Horses. Adam and Harrison loved temping with the stuff as well. So, we just put whatever we want on it. But it's not really until we're sort of getting fairly close to locking that the sound team will come into the cutting rooms and spot the episodes with us. Again, these are the guys that have worked on the previous season. So you get to a Slough House scene and we're like, yeah, it sounds like Slough House. We know what this is. It's more about like focusing in on, this is where we've done something creatively different with sound, and talk through it with them. It's more just for them to get a sense of what's coming their way. Same with music. So the composer will come in and we'll go through the episode. He instantly, recognizes when we're using his stuff and when we're not using his stuff, and suggest things and come up with ideas. But we've sort of spotted the episode for music by that point in terms of, this is where we think it's going to come in. This is where it's going to end. This is where it drops out. This is where it's really big. And then we log the episode. And then from my perspective as an editor, the next time I'm involved with post sound is the mix. And I've been lucky to work with Adam and Jim who like having the editor there in the mix. It's not always something that happens on TV, sometimes just because the editor's off onto their next project. But I love the mix. I really love the mix because you get to hear it in, Dolby Atmos. It sounds insane. As an editor, you feel like the client because you're the one sat there like giving notes, which is like a nice reversal. And, the sound team at Boom, that's the name of the company that do the sound, are just incredible. And they take everything that we've done with the temp and completely do it again 1,000,000 times better. Really, as an editor, my contribution in the mix is to just say, oh, well, it used to sound like this. And is that because we've consciously gone in a different direction, or is it because there's so much that we've forgotten that we had this and all that sort of stuff? So
that's really interesting.
Episode 5 ends on very distinct sound design, I think. I think I'm not mistaken.
That's a really good example. Thanks for bringing that up. I mean, at the end of episode 5 was really fun, and it became clear pretty early on as I was assembling. I was like, this feels like the sort of scene where you would have no music and it would be driven by the sound. They're inside this car. Adam knew from the beginning that he wanted to stay inside the car as much as possible and not sort of cut to wides and the assassin's perspective or anything. So it felt like a good opportunity to do some fun sound stuff. And because I used to do a lot of it for other editors, I do really enjoy doing temp sound because I find it's like a good refresh for my brain. So I don't have to think about editing the picture. I can just, do all the sound. So that sounded pretty good. I remember having headaches from how loud I was playing it back because there's a lot of gunshots and hits and all that sort of stuff. And, at one point earlier in the episode, that assassin is sort of referenced as being like the Terminator. I was like, great. So we tempt with a bit of like Terminator 2 score, which worked really well. Yeah, that was just a fun one. You sort of giving them an example of what it's going to sound like, and then obviously they do an absolutely amazing job making it sound the way it does in the finished thing. But I was proud of pitching the idea that we shouldn't have the Slow Horses music at the end of that episode, because I always love the sort of classic. I always think of like Game of Thrones episodes that like ended on silence, and you're like, oh wow, that was a really good episode because it ended on there was no music.
I was thinking about 24 too, when you don't have the countdown at the very end of the show.
Yes, that's exactly it. So it's not just because it's a cool idea. Obviously, you've come off this amazing wanna that then lands into the trunk of the car, and it just felt like, oh, we should just imagine that scene continues as the credits play.
It's a great cliffhanger for sure. Like you said, like that it's serious. Like, oh, they're not even playing the song. Like we're just hearing natural sound.
We're just hearing nothing. And it actually wasn't the original end of the episode. You would then cut from that to Molly in her flat, and Frank would say, I need to send a message, and then he would leave the final shot of the video of the episode was the envelopes. But we decided there's no way you can't end on like going to black. It's much better.
That's good. That's a good example of rewriting once again. Yeah.
I was wondering what's easier for you, like cutting the earlier episode or the last episode, because I'm thinking like there's a lot of information and new characters you need to show in the first episode, and it needs to make sense to the audience. And the difficulty with the latest episode would be like all the situation like kind of converge to the same point. And sometimes you struggle to find the right pacing between different situations. I noticed that in the end of season 3, when you have like all the shooting inside the kind of the basement, and I even noticed that they used the same shot twice from different angles, because they needed to. And at some point, like you have this character who are just like these two characters who are waiting while being shot at, and they're waiting to shoot back, and then we have to spend a bit of time outside with other characters, and then you go back, and it's like 5 to 6 minutes have passed, and if they're still here, still there waiting. And I was thinking, that must have been really hard, like cutting that, and I think it was really a puzzle.
Yeah, I think you should talk to Harrison about episode 6, because it's insane, and I'm so glad I didn't have to do it. And they had a similar sort of parallel action that they ended up intercutting, which is really, really, really fun. But yeah, I think this was my first time doing a sort of first episode of a series, and I'd sort of heard from other editors that it can be more of a challenge. And I think it was, in terms of there was a lot more eyes on that episode. Everyone wanted, there were a lot of notes, there was a lot of conversation about, episode 1 opens with the bombing at the shopping center, and then you have River being shot and killed. And that was always how it was written. That's how we had it. And for a long time, it was flipped the other way, because the argument was, we want to open with River. That's much more exciting. The shopping center explosion feels more like a B plot. And we never liked that, but that was just the way that it had sort of happened. And then eventually we switched it back, and everyone was happy with it. There was a lot of talk about, how many minutes is it until we see Lamb? Because we don't see him until after the opening titles. So we tried bringing that forward. And again, it just felt like too much was happening before the titles. And that whole point of that scene with Lamb is that it takes him forever to like get up and get to the phone, and it just was frustrating rather than funny. That was an interesting challenge for me, was working on episode 1 and all the sort of micro notes that people would have on it. As we got later into the season, the notes were a lot broader. And I guess that makes sense, because you don't want people turning on the new season and not finding it engaging. But on the show that I've just started now, I've deliberately decided to do the last episode and not the first one, just to see if it's any easier or harder.
So how did they determine who works on what? Do you guys just roll a dice, flip a coin?
It's literally
fight.
Literally a fight to the death. Yeah, and Harrison lost or won, depending on whether or not he enjoyed doing episode 6. We got all 6 scripts, and then Harrison and I just talked to each other and what would you want to do? And it just sort of worked out that way.
Did we talk about, like, because you were working on Litvinenko, and then you worked with David Webb on both Litvinenko and Hijack. And so this is a little bit different because now David's not with you, which is not that he was holding your hand, but it's kind of almost like a different
Absolutely.
workflow or whatever. So how is that, or how is it compared to working previously and then working on this as kind of the first editor?
Yeah, it was a sad day when I had to stop working with Dave because I have assisted him, and we worked on sex ed through COVID, so that was like quite an intense period. And he definitely was holding my hand, especially at the beginning of Litvinenko. I would have like the simplest scene to cut, and I would stress over it, and I'd do an assembly, and we'd watch it. We'd watch everything that I'd done towards the end of the week, and he'd be like, "Why have you done that? What is this? That doesn't make sense. Why have you cut to that shot?" And eventually, I learned that I could sometimes say, "Because of this," and he'd be like, "Oh, okay, fine." Like he wanted me to at least defend the decision.
Yeah, to be able to defend your work.
Exactly, but I learned a lot from how he approaches things, and that experience on Litvinenko was unique in the fact that I was assisting him but assembling, and he really helped me through that, and then a lot of the way that I mentioned previously how I sort of put the wide down, and then that's how Dave does stuff. I've inherited a lot of the ways that I work from him, and he comes from a commercials and music videos background as well, and he's used to quick turnarounds and having a lot of material and just keeping up to camera with watching the dailies. So that's something that I sort of learned from him as well. So hopefully he's still with me in spirit, even though we're not not in the same building anymore.
Yeah, that's a great story of mentorship, I think, between you and David. We have talked with other editors in film and stuff who are very passionate about like some sort of like mentorship program, and how it seems like, especially within this time of kind of remote editing. And I feel like I read in an interview that you had kind of mentioned about it. Like if it had been a remote situation for Litvinenko or whatever, like your career path would have been totally different, because you're kind of like dependent on being in an office with other people to like kind of take that next step.
Absolutely. I mean, you need it's for the being in the same building helps for all of the ways that you're learning, the actual craft of editing. But it's also just like having someone else to just chat to and, complain about the rushes in the morning whilst you're making coffee, and like all of that sort of stuff. And I think the project I've just started now, I am assembling from home. It's the second time that I've done that. And I don't know whether I prefer it or not, because I find it nicer to be in an environment with other people working. And, I'm trying to be aware of the assistants and help them out. And, they can cut whatever they want. I'll watch it. I'm happy to sort of, because I feel like I now need to pass that down. It's helpful because I've done that on previous projects. And when you're mentoring someone, you're forced to explain why you've cut something a certain way. And sometimes I can't do that. I'm just sort of like, well, because it feels right. And you have to be able to intellectualize, why you've cut a certain way. And I think that's helpful for my learning as well.
I mentor a couple of students in an online course, and I tell them like they have to kind of give notes to each other, give feedback to each other. And I say like it's a really good exercise because it forces you to understand why you feel the way you feel, and to kind of explain to yourself why that doesn't work for you. And that really helps you understand like the decision you're making and explaining to the director you're working with, for example.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's exactly that.
Crucial skill, yeah.
The sooner you can sort of watch what you've done with other people, the better, I think. But you have to be willing to be told that it's not working and to try other things. And I think, that's another thing that I learned, is that, there are times when you should be protective of what you've done, but most of the time, just accept that it's not right, and enjoy making it better, because there's no point being defensive.
Yeah, it's not personal.
And I was also wondering, how much room do you have as an editor when you're cutting, when you're making the first cuts? Like, because are you collaborating right away with the director, or do you come up with your own cut? And do you sometimes take decision, or you feel forced to keep every line in because that's what's kind of expected from you?
Yeah, I think with assembling, I do try to keep every line in, because the problem is if you cut something out, the director or someone's going to ask to see it eventually. So you might as well have a version that is the full scene as written. But also on the flip side of that, the assembling is your chance to do your take on the scene. So I'll just do whatever I think works. And obviously, as you get further into the project, you get to understand what the director's preferences are and all that sort of stuff. But on Slow Horses, it's fairly collaborative. So when we send out those assemblies to the director, if you don't hear back, that's good. And if you get a few notes, it's usually just a handful of notes of, oh, I was thinking maybe this, thinking maybe that. And, I always keep my version, copy the sequence, do their notes and move on. But yeah, I mean, I think the assembling is one of the really quite fun parts of the project. I'm saying that because I've just started on something and I'm in that world, and you're just sat at home and you're just watching and putting it together how you think it should be and hoping that it's right.
Yeah.
About that, I was wondering, like, did you ever find yourself in a situation where you really disagree with a director on any project and you really feel strongly about my cut is better and then the directors, like you really you are in total disagreements, and so you almost want to keep your project on the side to be able to show friends and say mine was way better than the movie?
Yeah, I think that comes into that whole thing of like trying not to be defensive, and I say that sounding like I've sort of perfected that, but I haven't. Like the project that I just finished, there were several points where I felt like what we had, and it wasn't necessarily something that I had done and then the directors had decided to do something different. It was, we had worked on this together, the directors and me, and then 3 months later we've got all these notes and I felt like we were changing it now from the original intention. And sometimes I think that's a good thing for an editor to just sort of remind the people involved, whoever's making these decisions, like, just remember this is how it used to be and we all liked this. Why are we changing it? But at the same time, I definitely learned on that project that you're working for the directors, basically. Like it's their project. They have a lot more context than you probably ever will, and that's just part of the balance of being an editor. Usually I find like by the time I've gone home and then come back the next morning, I don't care as much. I'm happy to try their version, and if it works, amazing.
Do you have any advice for aspiring editors?
But just make sure you're editing, definitely, especially even as an assistant or trainee or doing, maybe you're editing in a space that you would like to move out of eventually. Maybe you're doing corporate videos, but you want to make, Marvel films. Like, try and find projects that you are passionate about that you can edit on. Small, short films, student films, anything like that. Because I, was an assistant for a period of time and then had done like a couple of music videos or something in between. But when it actually came time to doing Litvinenko, I was like, oh my God, I need to remember how to actually edit. So doing editing is a great way of becoming an editor. But also, it's fine to email people. It's fine to message people, reach out to people, because that's what I did. That's how I eventually wrangled my way into sex education. People email me now and I keep their CVs on file. Michael, who was the assistant editor on Hijack, he DM'd me on Twitter back when it was called Twitter. And we were just sort of geeking out about, I think like The Last of Us Part 2 had come out. And we were both like, and then that just developed into, he's an editor, he wants to get into assisting. And that became a really great like working relationship. If you want to go that more traditional route that I did, which was, getting at the ground floor, it's still a very viable option. If in the UK, there's a lot of work in London, there's some work in Manchester. I'm sure just where are the post facilities where you might eventually be working as an editor? Can you be a runner there? Is there any projects there that you can sort of jump onto? Because working your way up is the way that a lot of people have got to where they are. And the other editors that I speak to, that was also their route. And it's great because you're working in an environment with a whole lot of other creative people. So although you might have got some great film degree, it's also cool to then just go and start at the bottom of the ladder, because pretty much everyone has to.
Yeah, and you don't always need a film degree to make it a career out of it.
Well, Robert, this has been really, really great. Thanks so much for talking to us.
It's been really great to talk to the three of you, and the questions and the way that you're asking sort of very specific editing questions is really satisfying and good to talk about with people that care.
Awesome, Robert. Thank you so much.